Hey everyone, this is Akash from Wise Talk. This is the first podcast in the series, and we have Greg Roche, the mastermind of networking. While everything is remote and we are in the pandemic, I think now is the time where we learn how to do the networking and maintain our network. So, Greg has some amazing ideas about how to do the networking, and that might lead you to some jobs and opportunities if you network with right people. So, let's talk with Greg Roche and hear about his thoughts. All right. So,
Thanks
hi,
for having me
Greg.
on.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm really happy that you're here to share the thoughts on networking. So, you wrote a book on networking for introverts, and I see you have a very vague experience in HR and healthcare, etc. So, explain us how did you end up writing a book on networking with your journey? So,
Yeah, I
how did
never
this
really
happen?
set out to write a book. That wasn't ever my goal. Now, I have a bit of a writing background. I was an English major in college. I never really, I would say, used that per se to write other books. I mean, of course, I use it every day in my life to write things for work and write things for other purposes. But writing a book wasn't something I ever thought I was going to do. It really came about because I had been spending a lot of time helping people with their networking in a couple different ways. I had been doing it through webinars. I had done some group coaching programs. I was writing articles on LinkedIn and on my website about it. I never could really figure out how to turn it into a book. So it just really wasn't something I focused on because I thought, most people aren't going to want to read a book about networking. And then as the more I thought about it, the more I interacted with people, I kind of heard people having the same struggles. I thought, well, that would be a good way to help some people. And I was specifically focused on people who don't like to go to networking events because I'm one of those people. I'm an introvert. I don't enjoy large groups of people. I do like people. I do like spending time with people. I like to interact with people, but big groups of people, big events are not my thing. It's just not something I like to do. And as we went into the pandemic in 2020, I was trying to write more and I had a little bit more time, like everybody. And I came across the idea of using fables or old stories as a way to structure my chapters and talk about networking. And once I found a framework for it, it really kind of started to come together, and it made it a little bit easier to take my ideas on networking, apply them to some of these stories and some of the lessons in these stories, and put it together in a way that helped walk people through the process of growing their network if they were introverts and they didn't like going to events or making cold calls, or things like that. And it was really a learning process for me, not just to put my ideas on paper but to do the whole publishing aspect. I self-published it through Amazon, and just learning how that works and learning how to do that was actually a project in itself. So I actually learned quite a bit about that going through it and putting my book out there.
So, did you basically read any psychology books or something, or any
Mhm.
other books in this process of researching to help
Definitely, I
introverts
looked
in
at some of
specific?
the more popular books on in introverts that are out there. Read some of those, and also looked at some other books that had to do with psychology, behavioral psychology, really to kind of answer more: why do people act the
Hmm.
way they act? Why do people interact with each other? Or why is it that when you are somebody who gives something to somebody else, there's a need to reciprocate, there's a need to try to give back. And I build that into
Hmm.
how I think about networking is, if you come at it and you give to people first, they're going to want to help you and they're going to ask you to, what can I do for you? And then it makes it a whole lot easier for you to say, hey, could you introduce me to somebody else? Or could you uh, give me the name of somebody who works at this company? Or what company should I be thinking about? And some of that came through some of that research for that book.
Yeah. So, when I think about networking, I was an introvert too long ago. Hopefully, uh, so when I was in school, the first thing which schools help people is to better connect socially and improve the networking skills. So now that you are focusing on introverts and giving suggestions for introverts, and we are in the pandemic, most of
Hmm.
the students don't go to schools now. So how do you think these students who are introverts and not socially meeting people?
Definitely makes it tougher because if we think about most of the people in our lives, they're people that we know because of proximity. There's geography or organizational proximity. The people that are near us in our day-to-day lives are the people we're going to get to know. When we're kids, it's the people we went to school with or the people that lived in our neighborhood. And as we get older, it continues to be people at school. And it's tough for students, right? Because that was their main way to continue to meet people. So I do think that's a tough thing to overcome. I think when it comes to networking, one of the problems that people run into, and especially introverts, is all they read online when they Google or they search how to network is, how to get ready to go to an event, and some of those articles are out of date, but how to get ready to go to an event, how to put together your elevator pitch, how to approach people, how to make small talk, these kind of things that introverts aren't going to want to do anyway. And I think you have to expand your definition of what networking is. It's not just a big room of people going around meeting people and shaking hands. It's really human connection, and human connection in a professional way. There's a lot of ways humans connect, but in a professional way, which is what we're talking about, you want to meet somebody who you can become trustworthy to you, that you can trust, that you know, that you like, that you want to work with or you want to interact with. And that happens a lot more on a one-to-one basis. And I think for students who are in school thinking, oh, how am I going to network? There's likely a group of people they do know. I mean, most people know somebody, whether it's family or friends, or even if it's just in their classes. If their classes are online, hopefully there's some interaction going there, or other people that they meet through other online communities. Again, many students I'm sure today are spending time in other online communities, and then how do you take that from an online relationship, meaning, and what I mean by that is, again, an online connection where you know this person, to expand it to be somebody that you might talk to in a video call like this or on a phone call, or even someday meet in person. But the idea is that, start. I always tell people, start with the circle of people they know, and then start working from there to be introduced. And that's a very effective way to meet a new person. If you think about it, again, whether if it's not proximity, most of the people you know or are acquainted with, you were introduced to by somebody else. So you want to focus on, uh, again, with the people what are they working on? What are they doing? What are they interested in? Who are interesting people they know? Do you have any common interests? Is there a way that that person could introduce you? Or by extension, could you introduce your friend to somebody you know? Again, going back to that idea of, if you make an introduction, they're going to be like, oh, you introduced me to your friend. I can introduce you to somebody I know. And this sounds very slow. It sounds very one to one. It sounds like it's going to take forever. But if you really think about it, if you went to a big networking event, if you have memories of doing that, like, how many of those people did you actually connect with and make a long term professional relationship with? It's usually a pretty small number. So it feels like you did a lot of networking because you met a lot of people and you got some business cards, and maybe you still have them and you feel like you need to follow up with them. But you're probably only connecting with one or two people, which is the same as if you're working with the network that you have and getting introduced. And so it's really, it sounds slower, but I've found that it can actually move pretty quickly. And I'm not talking about people that you want to spend your weekends with or go on vacation with. We're not talking about personal friendships here. We're talking about people that you can have a professional connection with, that you can talk to them, you can share what you're working on, they'll share what they're working on, you can help each other, provide ideas, solutions, things like that. And then it goes to the fact of, hey, I've got this friend I'd like to introduce you to. You guys probably have some of the same interests, and then it goes from there. So I think it's possible. You just kind of have to expand your definition of networking a little bit.
Right. So one of the example I can think is a lot of students are applying for jobs right now, just graduating and are trying to apply jobs, trying to network with people, get some referrals or something. So there, you published an article in Vice Talk about how to do the networking for while everything is remote. So if you can cite like a
Mhm.
few quick bulleted suggestions. I'm a student who is graduating and have
Mhm.
no great connections. So walk me through few bullet
Yeah.
suggestions about
Yeah.
what's my
I
first
think
step is going to be.
kind of what I was just referring to was there's likely other students, or maybe they're upperclassmen. And I would say for any students that are still in school, if you're not in your last year, work on meeting people who are upperclassmen, because they'll be going before you and they'll be in the working world, a year or two before you. So continue to work on those relationships and make those connections. But if you're getting ready to go out into the apply for jobs and do interviews, you know, if there are any of those upperclassmen that that you can reconnect with, those are good resources. Maybe some of your professors, and I'm sure professors get hit up all the time for that. But again, if you have the conversation and you just don't walk up to them and say, "Hey, who could you introduce me to?" It would probably be good if you had some sort of, again, professional level relationship and they get to know you and know what you're looking for. Other people, sometimes students have had internships. There's people you've worked with at an internship, and maybe just other people that your family or friends know that work at certain companies. And I think that part of the struggle, or part of the thing where people struggle, they struggle and have a hard time with this, is they'll go ask somebody. They'll say, who do you know, or who could you introduce me to? And the person says, well, where do I start? Right. I mean, I could introduce you to a lot of people, but I don't even know if they're going to be useful. So I think you as a student need to have some idea what types of jobs you want to do, what companies you're interested in. If you have that and you can give that to somebody and say, here's my list of companies, or here's the industries I'm interested in. Do you know anybody in any of these industries? Do you know anybody at any of these companies? It makes it a whole lot easier for them to come up with a name. And once they can do that, then it's really easy for them to say, hey, I'd like you to meet Greg, and he's interested in this company. He's coming out of school. Would it be possible for you to spend a couple minutes giving him your thoughts on either the company or the industry or what he should know? People are more likely to help you do that than if you approach them and say, I know we're friends, or you're a family friend, or you're an upperclassman, or you're somebody I met at my internship. Can you get me a job? And that's not going to go anywhere for you. I mean, that is a really low probability of success. But if you come at it with the idea of, these are the places I'm interested in working, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And if there's anybody it would be great if you just send an email and copy me and say, hey, this person's uh, looking for their first opportunity. They're just looking for information. Can you help them out? That way, it's a lot. Again, I always tell people it'd be easy to help, because the people who are easy to help usually get helped. If you're hard to help, people are going to try to find reasons not to help you. So, that's kind of the thing I normally tell people. I would say, start with who you know. I know that doesn't feel like networking, but if you approach it the right way, those people are likely to introduce you to somebody if you're easy to help. And being very specific about who you want to meet makes you easy to help.
Right, right, absolutely. Well, in the same lines of networking, so there was one of the questions from one of the students whom we discussed in the past. Sending LinkedIn connection is one of the ways to network, but the bigger question is, how do we maintain the network? Because once we connect, and like you just said, even in the past when we meet somebody, once we connect, just say hi, and after that we just forget,
Mhm.
and it's not a long term relation. So how do we, like, do you have like some suggestions of how do we keep maintaining the connection, because we don't know when
Yeah.
we need the help in the long
Most
term.
people most people like to hear from people that they're connected to. And I think sometimes we feel like with I think sometimes we feel like we can't just reach out to people for no reason. It seems a little, and if you think about it, long before the internet, when people still wrote letters, hand wrote letters, they were often responding to a letter, but oftentimes they would just write a letter. I haven't written a letter to a person in a long time, and they would just write a letter and they'd say, "Here's what's going on with me," and that person would maybe write them back, or they would wait a while and write them back. One of the ways I do it, whether it's LinkedIn or email, is I actually have in my LinkedIn, I just have my messages, right? That
Mhm.
are in the messages. I'll go back maybe 3 to 6 months and I'll look for people that I've had connections with, either conversations with, or people that I know that I've met in person that are in my network that I consider to be my close connections. And I'll see that I haven't talked to them in 6 months. And people sometimes think, oh, well, what would I say? And sometimes I go in there and I find somebody and I think, I wonder what they're up to. And I'll write, hey, last time we talked, you were working on this. How did that go? Or are you still working on this? Or how are things going? What's new? Would love to, catch up. And almost always people write back and they're like, hey, great to hear from you. They're almost never just don't respond.
Right.
Maybe they don't, or and so what? Big deal, right? And so
Yeah.
I'll go back through my list of LinkedIn messages. Oftentimes I'll go through my connections and I'll
Mhm.
see people that I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll try to reconnect. And just it's much simpler than people make it out. It doesn't have to be a long message, a long big long thing on what you're doing. And actually, I would just say, ask them what they're up to, ask them what they're doing. And then they can come tell you, because people love to talk about what they're doing. If I send you a big long message that's like paragraphs long saying, hey, here's what I'm working on, you might be like, I don't care. Like you reached out to me. But if I reach out to you and ask you how you're doing and you tell me, then there's kind of an expectation that I can write back and be like, oh, hey, I was just looking to change jobs, or I was interested in something you were doing, or I'm interested in this sort of business, what do you know? So I think just kind of go back through the messages you have. You can do the same thing with email. I keep a separate email folder called network, and if it's
Mhm.
one of my connections and we have emails back and forth, I just put it in that folder. And then the same thing, I'll scroll back through it over time and I'll say, I haven't talked to this person in a while, and I'll just connect. So I tend to go for, I wouldn't say that I'm the most connected person in the world. Far from it.
Yeah.
There are way more people who know way more people than I do.
Yeah.
But I have a fairly close knit, smaller network of connections. But I know that if I reach out to them, they'll respond. I know, and
Right.
they're in different industries and they're in different lines of work, and they're just interesting people that I like to stay in touch with. And again, you can be like, well, how does that help me? Well, I'm connected to every one of their networks. So
Yeah.
so I just need to know them, and then everybody that they know is one connection away from me. And they might come to me and say, hey, I want you to meet this person, they need help, which is great. Or I might go to them and say, hey, who do you know that looks like this or acts like this, or who is looking to you know work with a guy like me? And then they'll help me out there. So I think it's again, it's one of those things, like we read stuff about networking and we overthink it, and we start, oh, I got to write this perfect message that I'm going to send to somebody. It really just comes down to some basic human interaction, and and asking. And again, if your connection doesn't respond, oh
Mhm.
well, right? I mean, you're going to make new connections, and you're going to find other people. You just don't stop at the first person who doesn't respond. This is something you want to work on and keep doing day after day, so that you continue to grow those relationships and you have a strong network.
That's a really good suggestion, Greg. I think the key takeaways which I can think from that part is
Mhm.
sometimes saying hi, how are you can go a long way, and don't get disappointed when somebody don't respond. I think that's a great suggestions to
Yep.
maintain the connections. So in those lines, I see that you're also career coaching for transitions. So how is that going?
It's
Tell us
good.
about that.
It's tough, right? I mean, I do it kind of as people come along. I've done it different ways. Sometimes I've done it one on one for executives that are switching, making a major career change, and it takes a long time for them to find a role. And usually, the network's going to be part of finding a role. I've done group coaching where I'll get a group of people together and we'll over a course of weeks work on some of these things that I talk about, whether it's in my book or on LinkedIn, and actually putting those into action. And the group helps people share ideas. It helps keep them accountable. So I've done it a few different ways and had quite a few success stories. Some of them that were in the book were people that were in my group coaching program. I think the hard thing with networking and coaching people on networking is everybody who, not everybody, but a lot of people I talk to are networking at the exact wrong time they need to be networking. They're networking when they need a job. They're networking when they lost their job. They network when they just got out of school and they're like, oh my gosh, I need a job. And with networking, you need time to grow these relationships. They can't just happen overnight. Just like if you
Right.
plant your garden, you put the seeds in the ground, it doesn't come up the next day. You got to take care of it. It takes time to grow. And a lot of people don't think of networking in advance. So the thing I would say to your students or to anybody who's listening and watching this, don't wait to start networking until you need a job. You need to network long before that, and you need to keep networking even after you get a job. And I am the person, I learned this the hard way. I had a job for 9 years, had never had to apply for a job, go look for a job for 9 years, and one day I got laid off. And I had never networked, I had never talked to anybody, and I had to learn how to do it. And it took me a while to build these relationships, and it wasn't fast. And fortunately, I was able to find another job. But that was the point where I said, I'm never going to be in that situation again where I don't have a network. So while I was employed, kept networking, even though I didn't need a job, kept making connections. And what happened over time is, even though I was still employed, people started coming to me, not because I had the greatest resume or the greatest LinkedIn profile, but they knew who I was and they knew what I did. They started coming to me and telling me about jobs and approaching me and asking me to move. So I transitioned different roles over a series of years and got to a place where I am now, which again happened through networking. I work for a large healthcare company in the U.S. And that all those jobs happened because of my network. And that's what I try to tell people is, and it usually takes, I mean, I can say this over and over and over again, and some people listen and some people don't, but everybody who's been through the same thing I went through says the exact same thing. They say, I'm never going to let that happen to my network again. I'm never going to be under networked. And I guess if there's one takeaway, that's what I would really say is start today, start now, just start small. You don't have to meet 10 people in a week. Just connect with one. And if you do that consistently, your network will grow way larger and quicker than you thought it was going to. And these opportunities will start to come. Now, it is slow. It takes a little bit of time. It may feel like at first you're not getting anywhere, but I tell you, if you keep at it and you keep working at it, it will eventually take on a life of its own and almost become sort of self-sustaining.
So basically, that's going to be like a
Right.
one-liner for
Yeah.
this
Start
podcast, I guess.
small,
Right.
start today.
Right.
Don't wait till you need it. You got to start now.
Absolutely. I think this is a really great suggestions, Greg. I think the key summaries are definitely in your book, Networking for Introverts, and also the article which you published in Vice Talk about networking while everything is remote. So I hope all the viewers and listeners are going
Mhm.
to approach these resources
Mhm.
and find you in LinkedIn for any other help or
Yep.
information regarding this
Great.
one. All right, so we got to hear the great thoughts about networking from Greg, and I hope you all will take advantage of this suggestions. So the key takeaways is it's never too late. Plant the seed now, expect the fruits later, which means you should start doing networking right now, even if you don't need a job or if you need any help right now. So go ahead and network. And if you need to create resumes or cover letters for upcoming job applications, go visit wisedog.net and start creating amazing resumes and cover letters which can land you into jobs. Good luck.